More's been learned about the human brain in the last 15 years than probably any other time in mankind's history. And what we've learned about how the brain works could completely revolutionise the education system, but it hasn't yet. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how your brain works and how you can tap into your learning ability and be one of the few people who can learn anything whenever you want. Would that be useful to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So the brain is incredibly complex, but also very, very capable, but it doesn't come with an owner's manual. And rarely do we get really experience in how to use it the best and get the most out of it. So what I'd like to do is do that now. And the first surprise is that your brain's actually split into 3 separate chunks, which is kind of why that's on my logo. Okay, so what we have here, don't know what we've got here. What we've got here are 2 components of the human brain, okay? At the base of the skull, you've got the reptilian chunk. Now the reptile part of your brain is the oldest, the prehistoric part. It keeps you breathing, it keeps your heart beating, maintains your blood pressure. When this part of the brain is under stress, what do you think it does? What does a reptile do when it's stressed?
Hungry.
Angry?
Grown.
Typically what they do is they retreat in fear and they kind of withdraw. So they kind of go clench. Yeah? Can you clench for me? Fantastic. Everybody else clench for me? That's the one. Fantastic. Good clenching. Now, when a reptile is super happy, what does it do? What do reptiles do when they're happy? Beg.
It's something
They bash. They bash. Bash for me, darling. Bash. Everybody bash. Bash. Fantastic. Good. Now, the reptile brain is in charge of the physical body, okay, especially fight or flight and physical safety. It's also very, very territorial, and it will monitor your safety zone and proximity that we talked about yesterday, and it gets jumpy when people get in too close. Alright? Now, if you don't feel physically safe, how well do you learn?
Wouldn't.
Not very well. So you need a happy reptilian brain in order to relax and take in information. You need to be basking. Everybody bask? Now, the next important part of the brain that you need to know about is the mammalian, the mammal part of the brain. This is the part that handles hormones, the immune system, and long-term memory. It's also the part of you that handles your emotions, which explains why emotions and memory are so closely linked. You remember the memories that have the most emotions on them, but the first time you did anything, your first kiss, your first job, your first song. Now, what does a mammal do if it's unhappy? Usually they bare their teeth and growl. Would you bare your teeth and growl for me? More. Oh, everybody else, bare your teeth and growl for me. The mammal part of the brain is said to be in charge of the emotional body and emotional safety. When it's happy, it's very much connected to the physical body. And what sound does a happy mammal make? A contented purr. Everybody else purr for me? The ideal learning state is to have a happy reptile, which is basking, and to have a happy mammal, which is purring. Everybody do both for me? Now, every human being has a reptile part and a mammal part. So in order to learn well, you have to create physical safety and emotional calmness. There's a phrase I like, which is no relaxation, no learning. Also means no relaxation, no learning. If you want to be a good student, and you are good students, are you not?
Absolutely.
Then you need to be safe and calm. And if you want to teach well, you also need to be in the same emotional state. So, there's another chunk of the brain that you need to know about, and you've probably heard of this before, where the brain is split into 2 hemispheres. So you've got the left side and the right side. The left-hand side is good for logic, reasoning, numbers, calculations. The right-hand side is more into colour, melody, and music. Now, to be honest, this model's a little bit out of date, but it is a useful way to think about it, right? We have the right hemisphere of the brain, standing on the right. This is the creative part, and we have the left hemisphere of the brain, which is the thinking part. Now, what we want to do is have your right hand on the mammal's shoulder, and your other hand on that shoulder, okay? Now, depending on what side is dominant, will determine how that person thinks. Are they more creative, or are they more logical? Fantastic. So what we have here is a very well-connected brain. We've got the most creative people who have a beautiful communication between both hemispheres, not just the right-hand side of the brain. Extremely analytic and extremely creative at the same time is what makes genius. So if you have a happy reptile and a happy mammal, and the left and right hemispheres talking to each other, If we've got an unhappy reptile and an unhappy mammal, these two turn away and don't talk to each other. Now, if you're right brain dominant, you tend to attack inwardly and at self. You feel and you stew and you huff. So you'll feel bad, you'll pout, you'll cry, and behaviours that bring yourself down. If you're left brain dominant, you'll attack outwardly at other people. You'll stomp, you'll have rage, you'll anger, have shouting, hitting. You'll show up late and show up late on purpose. So if you've seen these kind of behaviours happening in people that you know, now you know what's going on. So, what do we need to do? We need to get them physically safe, emotionally safe, and then everything's talking to each other at that point. In fact, let's just bring this in. So if we can have you bask, we can have you purr, you guys smell at each other. What am I thinking, Mark? So, then there's a third and final part, third and final chunk of the brain. There's the 100 billion brain cells that make up the capacity of the brain. Now, if you put that in perspective, as you grew up in the womb, as a 12-week-old embryo, you were developing 2,000 brain cells a second. Now, an adult bee, by comparison, has 7,000 brain cells total. Now, here we have the conscious mind, with a limited focus, and it tends to be very rational, logical, and it deals with the now. What we have here is the infinitely more powerful unconscious mind, who deals with the past. It can handle something like 2 million bits of information per second.
Oh, come on, Kev. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Now, I want you to know that you've got access to all the different resources in the brain. And actually, unconscious mind isn't really an accurate name. There's no part of you that's unconscious. You may have learned not to direct your attention to your unconscious mind, because if you did, you'd be too powerful. Now, the Western world teaches you consciously, verbally, which is actually 2% of the overall size of the brain. Okay, 2%. In fact, the unconscious mind outnumbers the conscious mind by 10 billion to 1. All learning, all behaviour, and all change is unconscious. So as an educator, which part should I be teaching? Unconscious. Who's really in charge? 10 billion times more powerful than the conscious mind. Now, do I really care about the conscious mind? Yes, because the conscious mind is what's responsible for getting this person here. Okay? But in terms of learning, I really want to be talking to the unconscious mind. So, I'd like the conscious and the unconscious pair to link arms and go for a little wander around the room. Now, the unconscious, hang on. The unconscious mind can't speak. Okay? But you can point and direct the conscious mind. Does that make sense? If you think about it, off you go. If you think about it, how do you get communication from your unconscious mind? You get hunches, you get emotions, you get dreams. Yeah? You ever had intuitions or messages from your unconscious? It doesn't talk, it makes you feel. Now, when do we tend to get signals from the unconscious mind? Usually when you're relaxed, when you're in trance, when you're drifting off to sleep, maybe when you just wake up, when you do meditation or visualization, and we're connecting directly with the unconscious. So when you take the conscious mind for a tour, the conscious mind can talk about it, but the unconscious mind can't talk about it. It can only nudge and direct. Meanwhile, we have a happy reptilian brain, a happy mammalian brain, and 2 happy hemispheres. And as you can see right now, my mind is wandering. So to put all 3 chunks together, information coming in goes to the 2 hemispheres, which acts like a switchboard. It reroutes that information to the thinking brain. But if you're under stress, the reptilian brain shuts the switchboard down and clenches, and that's when your mind goes blank. Very often people who've had a poor learning experience feel unconsciously threatened by the thought of upcoming learning experiences, and then it becomes a vicious circle. Because they feel crap at learning, they feel stressed about learning, and therefore learning shuts off, and you have a self-fulfilling prophecy. The secret is to get into a nice, calm, relaxed state before you learn anything.